When I started doing my digging for the F-15 video and how the plane was created, there were so many factors quoted by so many different people, I knew I couldn't just quote one of them and call it a day. I had to find out what order they showed up in, which one took precedence, and which one was the most important, if any. So you can imagine what happened when my War Thunder plane self discovered yet another set of declassified military documents containing all of those answers and more. And upon remembering how much fun it was to leak them on stream the last time, I straight up rescheduled another stream just to make it fit so I could watch as the chat turned my stream into an F-15 Reddit thread. There were dragons and then an F-15 came through the portal. So that's where those went. I might need to actually start being active on Reddit just to make these memes go places. A thread that just wouldn't be complete without also trash-talking the fighter mafia at every conceivable opportunity. Finally, some Boyd shade? Yeah, hold on, let me take a big sip of the bourbon here for this. I'll leave the source document linked in the description below for you to read if you want, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show as we roast the fighter mafia and figure out exactly where the F-15 actually came from. People think the reformers had some hand in it. People think it was like learned from the lessons of Vietnam. Some people think it was as a result of the MiG-25. Turns out it's a combination of all three of them. And apparently the fighter mafia gets mentioned in here somewhere, so when we get to that part, I am grabbing bourbon because I will need to be max. Actually, you know what? I should probably grab the bourbon now so it is time to sit in because I want to be at maximum smartass for when John Boyd finally comes up in this damn paper. Excellent idea. Let me finish off this gamer sups. Fun fact, the first biplane is the reason why the F-15 was made. I'm gonna need you to elaborate on that because that's wild. Plane flew, therefore it caused the Alright, I get it. The F-15 exists because it was inevitable. The F-15 is just Thanos. The 15 exists because physics must be damned. This is America. We don't make sense. We make dollars. New meme format. F-15 exists because yes, please make that. I want to see those. F-15 exists because Big Bang happens in the background. In the beginning, God created the heavens of the F-15 and he saw that it was good. I have now cleared the gamer subs. It is time for the bourbon and we will start reading. I'm going to grab that and I will be right back. Please come up with more F-15 memes.
A few moments later.
F-15 exists because C's Russian bias. We wanted to show them how to do it properly. Communist cries in the background. F-15 exists because God hated the dinosaurs. F-15 exists in spite of Isaac Newton. F-15 exists because the USSR did what is known as, you weren't supposed to do that, and that being that they actually scared the US. F-15 exists because the commies couldn't do it right the first time. F-15 exists because communism shouldn't. Some engineer in Douglas saw a bumblebee flying and had a bright idea. If a bee, which by all accounts and laws of nature should not be able to fly due to its body being too fat and its wings being too small, then it must be possible to turn a brick into a flying object. Thrust to weight, just spit in the face of gravity. The F-15 exists because side-eyes gravity. Someone told me I couldn't do them sideways. F-15 exists to make Politburo members fear for their lives. This has to be the best meme format. It is. I might need to actually start being active on Reddit just to make these memes go places. Sir Isaac Newton, I have just discovered the laws of physics. F-15. We're just gonna have to test those now, aren't we? The F-15 exists to beat the ever-living shit out of gravity Doom style. F-15 exists because fuel needs to burn. F-15 exists because the US didn't have anything angry enough to make the USSR need new pants. Gravity and aerodynamics looking at each other. Why do I hear boss music? We got an evil cackling, keep going. F-15 engine goes out, second health bar appears. The F-15 doesn't exist as an inevitable consequence of the universe. The universe exists because the F-15 wanted something to insult. Oh my god! What a line to open up with the first chat! The F-15 is just the airplane Chuck Norris. F-15 exists because someone told us we couldn't make Doom Guy real. The F-15 is the best way to dissolve a Soviet Union state. Do you think God stays in heaven because he is afraid of his own creations? Looks at F-15. F-15 sees dinosaurs. I can burn you. Dinosaurs didn't die because of a natural meteorite, and F-15 went back in time and shot it off course with an ASM-135 so that it could have fuel to burn now. The F-15 in heaven, God. Oh my god, that KD record. Welcome to heaven. There were dragons, and then an F-15 came through the portal. So that's where those went. The universe is just the carbon footprint of one giant F-15. The Big Bang was just an F-15 starting up. The F-15 moves at Mach Jesus because he's been sent by God to send you to meet him for a meeting. F-15 sees a target-rich environment. I can milk you. Dear God. On that note, I'm going to start reading. It became evident to the Air Force that it needed a new air superiority fighter, whereupon U.S. Air Force officials initiated studies aimed at defining such an aircraft. A lengthy concept formulation phase ensued, during which the important theory of energy maneuverability emerged. I love it. They're not giving credit to John Boyd. It's like the important theory emerged. We're not giving credit to the guy who made it because he's a fucking dick. Also, I found this out. John Boyd didn't even invent the theory. He copied the graphs off a Douglas engineer and then slapped on a comparison between the F-4 and the MiG-21 to make it relevant. The man was nothing. He stole 90% of the math and he didn't even understand it. Yeah. And he got his reputation of being able to get around 40-second Boyd in training simulations, not even in combat. He got no kills in North Korea because he was never allowed to be a flight lead where he was allowed to shoot. So let me get this straight. A fucking pilot in Korea wasn't allowed to shoot. How bad was he? He spent a brief tour in Korea and he was always limited to the wingman position. And just like in Vietnam, Air Force policy was that only the wing leader was only the lead was allowed to shoot. So he never got to fire on anything. When the Air Force isn't willing to move you out of the wingman position, that means you ain't fucking worth it. Military aircraft seldom, if ever, leap unchanged from the drawing board to the flight line. Rather, they evolve slowly. Each stage of development influenced by such diverse factors as technology, economics, politics, enemy threat, and just plain chance. These varied forces interacting, not the planner's original vision, frequently dictate the end result. That's their way of saying this was a combination of the fighter mafia, the bomber mafia, and the MiG-25 all playing its role. Or as I intend to phrase it, the Goldilocks zone of the crossroads between bureaucracy, bullshitting, and shit pants. That needs to be a Venn diagram for the video. After a false and misguided start in early 1965, the F-16 underwent a barrage of internal and external pressures that affected its final design. But because of the effort of a few men dedicated to reviving the air superiority mission, the F-15 emerged at the time of its first flight in July 1972 as nearly intact as they could have reasonably expected. That's the polite way of saying they got as much as we were going to give them and they can shut the fuck up about it. More important, in causing a re-examination of basic doctrine, the F-15 opened new issues whose ultimate impact on Air Force thought and programs must await the verdict of future historians. Here we are, boys! This is our mission! They've been waiting for us! The door's open! The author wishes to thank the following for granting interviews. Oh, I see a few names on here that I am not appreciating. Generals Arthur C. Agon, Albert P. Clark, Glenn A. Kent, Felix Rogers, John Burns, Edward McCoff, Roger Rodarmer, William Georgie, Colonels John Boyd, here we go, and Richard McIntosh, Messrs. Calvin Hargis, Thomas Christie, another one of the reformers, Dale Davis, Charles E. Myers, Pierre Spray, fuck that guy in particular, and Heinrich Weigand. This study traces the evolution of the F-15 Eagle air superiority fighter from its beginning in 1964 through the aircraft's first flight in July 1972. It examines the military, technological, economic, and political influences on the weapons system acquisition process. Among the more innovative elements of this research and development program were the energy maneuverability of Colonel John R. Boyd and Thomas Christie, the only valuable piece they gave this project, a contractual arrangement loosely billed as the fly before buy philosophy, and the definite Air Force commitment to building the aircraft that first manifest in the appointment of Brigadier General Roger K. Rodarmer as the Washington F-15 spokesman, then through the support given Major General Benjamin Bellis, the F-15 Strong Program Director. As story ends with air superiority reaffirmed as a major mission, but not yet fully defined. Spray, me and all my homies hate him? Yep. To crack's neck? Nah, time to make him bleed, boys. If boy is bad, Spray is quite literally like his name only coming out of the ass end of a skunk. Yeah. Following the Korean War, President Dwight D. Eisenhower adopted a policy of nuclear deterrence that relied primarily on the Strategic Air Force and downgraded the conventional war mission of the tactical fighter aircraft. For example, example, the Century Series fighters, F-100 through F-111, were increasingly designed for use against strategic targets in nuclear war rather than for tactical air combat. Although air superiority remained the prerequisite for conducting any air operation, General Bruce Holloway, the Air Force Vice Chief, wrote in 1968 that plans to develop a new day fighter were continually sacrificed in favor of interceptor and fighter-bomber designs. According to the following quote, penetration was more important than maneuverability, ordnance load carrying capability more important than armament, alert status more important than sustained sortie rates. The tactical fighter became less and less an air superiority system and more what was once called an attack aircraft. Indeed, jet fighter bombers had performed so well in Korea that a 1957 study rated them just as capable in aerial combat as the day fighter. Forgetting the political and geographic limitations that shackled FIF in Korea, the Air Force continued to promote the most expeditious means of gaining air superiority. To first destroy the enemy air force at the place where he is most vulnerable, which is on the ground and in his nest. Major General Kinney, Assistant Deputy Chief of the Staff for Research and Development, summarized this basic strategy. To achieve air superiority, the most lucrative method is to destroy enemy air capability when it is on the ground by attacking his airfields and parked aircraft. Runways are bombed to prevent takeoffs. Airplanes are destroyed before they can be employed. Fuel and ammunition dumps, maintenance facilities, and command and control centers are attacked. Which, I must note, basically means that when the politicians put down the strategy and the rules of engagement in Vietnam that said you cannot bomb targets on the ground, they literally kneecapped the Air Force's entire core operating strategy. Probably one of the reasons they did so poorly is because their entire modus operandi was shut down by Congress straight out of the gate. They didn't get to use their operating philosophy. They were simply told, no, you can't do it. And then they were forced to go to a fallback that they had deliberately forgotten.
It all makes sense now.
This is where it all started. This bullshit right here. Although General Agin failed to convert OSD officials, he did manage to persuade LeMay's successor, General John P. McConnell, of the need for a new fighter. Back to my McConnell, Agin drafted a statement on tactical air superiority that the former endorsed and circulated Air Force worldwide. The policy statement issued in May 1965 after combat operations in North Vietnam had begun, recognized the Air Force's requirement to win air superiority. So they recognized that they were in need of an air superiority fighter from the beginning, before the fighter mafia even showed up, at least according to the official documentation. Completed on 27 February 1965, the Bond study recommended the Air Force acquire a mix of high and low-cost aircraft as the most economical way to strengthen the tactical force. Here's where the high-low mix comes from. Okay. This is also what led to the F-16, although Boyd tries to take a lot of credit for that, at least from what I've been reading, and that's where the FXX program came from. Meanwhile, another Aerostaff study on tactical fighter ground attack aircraft, Jesus, that was a mouthful, had gotten underway under the direction of Colonel Bruce Hinton. Oh, this guy! He was a saber pilot, and he was a saber pilot in Korea who actually got kills, unlike fucking John Boyd. I recognize that name. He was actually good. Actually, I think he was the guy that got first blood for the F-86 Sabre. He got its first kill. I sense the Cap does not like this Boyd guy. John Boyd mentioned visible eye twitch. Yeah, thought he was cool at first, but that was before I actually started doing my digging, and I'm just like, dude. Broken clock is right twice a day, and that's about how it goes. And the OODA loop was actually a very good concept, but I will have to do my research into that to see if it's also something he kind of picked up and pwned off. His see, think, react, repeat engagement theory was also ripped straight from a German World War II ace. Really? I want to say, please DM me the documentation / sourcing for that, because I want that. You research Boyd and that other old bastard who works with RT? Yeah, frickin' spray. And so you suddenly develop a visible spike in blood pressure every time their names are mentioned. Yep, General DeSasway worked to bring to bear the influence of all major tactical air commanders. For example, he arranged periodic conferences with his counterparts in the U.S. Air Forces, Europe, and the Pacific Air Forces. Their joint position statements, aptly called the 12-star letters, 3 4-star generals, which they sent to General McConnell, were difficult to ignore. The first such conference held at TAC headquarters at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia in February 1966, produced several position statements on tactical air power. Signed by Generals DeSasway, Holloway, and Hunter Harris, the letters significantly influenced the FX requirement. The 3 commanders stated simply that air superiority would be severely jeopardized if the FX were designed to accommodate both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions. Instead, they urged the Chief of Staff to endorse air superiority as the primary mission of the FX, with secondary missions being considered a bonus from the aircraft's superior design. General DeClassifieed and his operations advisors, Colonels Burns and Gordon M. Graham, believed that air superiority was essential throughout the spectrum of tactical warfare. Given the limitations on the employment of tactical air power, such as the enemy sanctuaries that existed during the Korean and Vietnam Wars, an uncompromised fighter was needed to sweep the skies clear of enemy aircraft. They argued the only way the Air Force could meet the challenge posed by lightweight, maneuverable Soviet fighters in the 1970s was to design a superior air combat fighter. Although the 12-star letters received high-level consideration, Headquarters U.S. Air Force decided to follow the path of least resistance, namely to continue to study, justify, and document the case for a fighter capable of handling both the air superiority and ground attack missions. On 8 December 1965, Air Force sent requests for proposals to 13 aircraft manufacturers for the initial FX parametric design studies. After receiving bids from 8 companies, the Air Force on 18 March awarded study contracts to Boeing, Lockheed, and North American. A fourth firm, Grumman, participated in the study effort on an unfunded basis. After considering the effects of 5 variables, avionics, maneuverability, payload, combat radius, and speed, on the FX in terms of weight and cost, the contractors came up with some 500 proposed designs. Jesus Christ! Indeed, the emphasis on the multi-purpose features of the FX dominated ASD's parametric studies. The division's goal was to develop an aircraft with sufficient performance capability to offset the alleged Soviet superiority and maneuverability, while maintaining the continued U.S. edge over Russian planes in range. To accommodate these multi-purpose requirements, the 4 study contractors agreed the FX needed avionics comparable to the the F-111's Mark II system. Moreover, they understood that the multi-purpose meant the use of a variable sweep wing design for the FX, and that a high bypass ratio turbofan engine seemed preferable to a low bypass engine. As for armaments, they called for considerable air-to-ground ordnance, including the 20mm M61 Vulcan with 1,000 rounds, 4 fuselage-mounted missiles, and a 4,000-pound allowance to permit loading 8 Mark 82 bombs or other munitions. Finally, the contractor designs favored potted engines over fuselage mounting to avoid the inlet distortion problems of the F-111, and placing horizontal tail surfaces on the engine pods for increased area. So wait, if I'm visualizing that right, they wanted to create a tactical Learjet and call it a fighter. Just threw up a little bit in your mouth from that description. Some critics saw ASD's parametric FX design as a typical case of gold plating. They complained the Aeronautical Systems Division, convinced the FX represented the one aircraft of the generation, had decided to advance aeronautical art by applying their wish lists across several disciplines. Others, however, thought that while ASD engineers had made a sincere attempt to provide the Air Force with the best airplane possible, they had become victims of the system. This sounds like the fighter mafia, again having their views listed but not named. Regardless of these criticisms, what emerged was a proposed FX weighing more than 60,000 pounds to accommodate all the avionics and armaments packages. The aircraft would have a 110 pound per square foot wing loading, a thrust weight ratio of 0.75, and a 2.2 bypass turbofan engine. That's huge though. That's like a pair of A-10 engines being strapped to the ass, and then strapping in an afterburner. The entire drag force equation for that doesn't make sense. How did they think this would work? Yeah, let's grab that water real quick. Because we've reached the energy maneuverability theory, which means it's time to laugh at John Boyd. Finally, some Boyd shade? Yeah, hold on, let me take a big sip of the bourbon here for this. General Ferguson and his development planners, Major General Glenn A. Kent and Brigadier General F.M. Rogers, sensed that the FX requirements were badly spelled out. They subsequently were able to persuade General DeClassifieed to modify his requirements, thanks in large part to the work of Major John R. Boyd. Here we go. In October 1966, Boyd joined the Tactical Division of the Air Staff Directorate of Requirements. So basically, he somehow made his way into deciding how things get to do. When asked to comment on the representative FX design, he summarily rejected it. A veteran pilot of the late 1950s and author of the Air Combat Training Manual used by Fighter Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, Boyd was well qualified to assess fighter aircraft. In 1962, while completing an engineering course at St. Georgia Tech, he studied the relationships between energy and energy changes of an aircraft during flight, and devised a method to measure aircraft maneuverability, the ability to change altitude, airspeed, and direction. AKA, he copied it off a 1954 fucking Douglas scientist. Major Boyd continued his energy maneuverability studies at his next station, Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, even though his primary assignment there was a maintenance officer. At Eglin, he met Thomas Christie, a mathematician who also saw promise in the EM theory and who had access to a large-capacity, high-speed computer. With Christie's help, Major Boyd gained access to the computer to confirm his calculations. For this irregularity, i.e. working outside authorized channels, they were both severely criticized. However, with the help of Brigadier General Alman T. Culbertson, Air Proving Ground Center Vice Commander, Boyd and Christie fought off repeated attempts to terminate their studies, and in May of 1964 published an official 2-volume treatise on energy maneuverability. Boyd and unqualified. How many times am I going to hear that today? The answer, yes. Criticized, not vaulted from the military and shoved in a cell like anyone who doesn't have friends in high places. Yeah. Oh yeah, just ripped all of his theories and stuff from other people and screamed it loud enough to be heard. What is it they always say? You're not the first person who came up with the joke, you're just the person who said it louder. Oh, thank you. It says it right here. Although the EM theory did not represent anything new in terms of physics or aerodynamics, it led Boyd and Christie to devise a revolutionary analytical technique that permitted fighter jocks to communicate with engineers. In other words, it finally made them fucking smart enough to speak in words that could be understood by people who had actual fucking intelligence. The EM theory expressed in numbers what fighter pilots have been trying to say for years by moving their hands. It also permitted planners and developers to compare competing aircraft directly and to demonstrate the effects of design changes on aircraft performance. Finally, the theory can be used to teach pilots how to exploit their aircraft's advantages over that of the enemy. The EM theory was not in final form at that time and has undergone 5 or 6 improvement or refiner phases since then. I think we can agree that at least the energy maneuverability theory had value for like making aircraft better in terms of general maneuverability capabilities, but like f the guy who thinks he came up with it. Meanwhile, working within the tactical division, Major Boyd began to apply the EM theory to the FX, projecting how the aircraft would perform in the critical maneuvering performance envelope, the subsonic and transonic speeds up to Mach 1.6 and altitudes up to 30,000 feet. He then asked TAC, ASD, and the study contractors to provide trade-offs between range, structural requirements, and onboard equipment. By the spring of 1967, through the efforts of Boyd and others, a 40,000-pound FX aircraft was popped out. Rationally angry hearing it described as popped out? Yeah. See, its proposed engine bypass had been lowered to 1.5, thrust to weight increased to 0.97, and the FX top speed scaled down to a range of Mach 2.3 to 2.5. Hold up, something. I want to see how much of their advice they actually took here with the engine. What's the F100 engine bypass ratio? Bypass ratio 0.6 to 1. Yeah, so they didn't take any of that fucking advice either. Doggedly pursuing his research into drag polars, he later examined the effects of optimizing propulsion, configuration, avionics, and weapons for the fixed and variable sweep designs. His calculations of those trade-offs pointed to 0.6 as the best engine bypass ratio. Okay, so wait, hold on a fucking minute. Hold on. Proposed engine bypass had been lowered to 1.5. And somehow you magically fucking selected the value that is currently in effect. The exact one. I don't believe you. Press X to doubt? Yeah, I am mashing X to doubt. Hammer that button, my doubt is limitless. The design studies incorporated into the final F-15 configuration confirmed these values. Suck my dick. The FX formulation phase continued throughout the spring and summer of 1967. By March, a 3-part concept formulation package and a technical development plan was drafted to specify the FX rationale, cost, and development schedule. Craigslist has redeemed this accent for 1 minute. All of this. In June, a complete CFP was issued and underwent a final air staff answer, a messaging, by August 1967. Secretary Brown then submitted a revised cost proposal to OSD as the Air Force's recommended new tactical fighter candidate to replace the F-4. He noted that the Air Force's tactical force structure for the mid-1970s, limited to 24 wings by OSD, included 13 F-4, 6 F-111, and 5 A-7 wings that were respectively oriented to perform counter-air, interdiction, and close air support missions. Secretary Brown now argued for the paramountcy of counter-air air superiority, without which the other missions would either be too costly or impossible, and the need to protect ground forces against enemy air attack. He noted that although the multi-purpose F-4 Vietnam workhorse was a capable air-to-air fighter, its continued effectiveness was doubtful in the view of the new advanced Soviet fighter series. Air Force Secretary noted the recent Soviet fighter designs concentrated on improving range and payload. U.S. tactical air superiority in the Korean and Vietnam Wars was attributed to superior pilot skill and better armament and avionics. These advantages were not expected to prevail in a conventional war in Europe, for example, because of the likelihood of encountering well-trained Soviet pilots. Moreover, the Soviets were increasing their maneuverability edge and significantly improving their missile and fire control systems. The Air Force cautioned that it can no longer rely on pilot skill alone to offset any technical inferiority of U.S. aircraft. To win an air war against Soviet forces, it is essential that U.S. pilots be given the best aircraft the technology can afford. Boyd's entire pitch is now basically that of any trash self-help guru. Oh no. Yeah, Boyd was a salesman. Boyd was a fucking car salesman who was put in charge of an aircraft project. Based on a 1,000 aircraft buy, the average FX flyaway cost was computed at $2.84 million per copy. Hold up, just for reference. Inflation calculator. The average flyaway cost was $284 million, which today would cost about $27 million per aircraft. By the spring of 1965, there was a general consensus in the Air Force and Navy that the TFX F-111 would not meet the needs of both services. It was thus hardly surprising that in October of 1965, the Air Force and Navy independently issued operational requirements for multi-mission fighter aircraft. So here's where we got the differences. Anticipating that OSD might impose a new commonality requirement on them, the services agreed to disagree from the onset. In December, they established a joint working group of senior officers to weigh the merits of the commonality philosophy and the development of the next fighter. The effort did little more than stiffen service resistance to the commonality push. OSD, however, refused to tolerate this kind of intransigence, and in May of 1966, McNamara ordered a joint review of the commonality issue. Conducted over the next 8 months, the review confirmed that the needs of the Air Force and Navy could not be met by a single airframe. The two services argued that attempts to merge their requirements would produce, at exorbitant cost, a grotesque mutation with increased weight and reduced performance. Whereas the Air Force emphasized maneuverability performance through low wing loading, the Navy was more concerned with mission versatility, such as extended loiter time for fleet air defense. The services conceded it might be feasible to produce separate airframes optimized for each service and using essentially common propulsion and avionics subsystems, or to produce variations of a common airframe using common systems. But the potential savings of either alternative cannot be estimated accurately without further data. Another element of their proposal was for each service to ask their contractors to submit a service design and a variant for the other service. General D. Sisway had decided the time had come to settle the controversy within the Air Force between the multi-purpose and air superiority advocates. In February 1968, he issued TAC Required Operational Capability, an update of the 1965 QOR. The document cited two new threats in justifying its call for an air superiority fighter. First, the MiG-21 exploiting its ground control interception advantage, which continued to trouble U.S. Air Force pilots in Vietnam. Secondly, the Soviets had displayed several new fighters at the July 1967 Moscow Air Show, and one of these, the Foxbat, was regarded as superior to existing and projected American counterparts, including the representative FX described in the August 1967 CFP, in speed, ceiling, and endurance. To counter this threat, TAC established several minimum acceptable requirements. 1. A short takeoff and landing capability over a 50-foot obstacle with a 4,000-pound load within 3,000 feet. 2. A 230 nautical mile radius of action on internal fuel and 2,600 nautical mile ferry range with external fuel. 3. Speeds between Mach 1.1 on the deck and Mach 2.7 bursts at altitude. High energy maneuverability. And 5, a one-pilot crew. TAC expressed no preference between fixed and swing wing designs, or between turbofan and turbojet engines, provided the engine was smokeless. However, even as it attacked the multi-purpose advocates for having undermined all the air superiority effort, TAC wanted the FX to possess an all-weather capability and to be able to be looked down and shoot down. Moreover, the ROC specified that the FX had to be adaptable for ground support missions once air superiority was achieved. In May of 1968, General McConnell explained the Air Force position to the Senate's Armed Services Committee. "We had a very difficult time in satisfying all the people who had to be satisfied as to what the FX was going to be. In fact, we had a difficult time within the Air Force. There were a lot of people in the Air Force who wanted to make the FX into another F-4 type of aircraft. We finally decided, and I hope there is no one who still disagrees, that this aircraft is going to be an air superiority fighter." When asked if the FX might also be used for close air support, the Air Force Chief of Staff replied, "It would be over my dead body." Wow! For that quote to get used in a high-level conference between, like, government officials and the Senate, that is a power move. Are you going to use this thing for close air support over my dead body? Like, god damn! The worst they could say is no! Meanwhile, the Navy had undertaken to improve its fighters' energy maneuverability characteristics whenever the Air Force did so. Dissatisfied with the VFAX, its replacement for the F-111B model of the TFX, the Navy decided to cancel it and tacitly accept an unsolicited bid from Grumman Aircraft, a traditional Navy contractor, to develop a more competitive fighter. Designated the VFX, the Navy's proposed aircraft combined the previous multi-mission requirements, including air superiority, in two variant designs, the VFX-1 and the VFX-2. The Navy now argued that the VFX could not only match the FX performance, but was adaptable to both carrier and land-based operations. The VFX subsequently became the F-14 Tomcat. That's what I figured. By the spring of 1968, DDR&E accepted that its commonality drive had petered out. Dr. Foster recommended, however, that the Air Force and the Navy conduct a joint development program, the one item both services had agreed upon. The Navy was interested in the engine because it would provide more thrust than the TF-30 engine intended for the TFX. To unify the effort, the Air Force made Brigadier General Roger K. Radarmer liaison for FX activities. Proceeded to select a staff of fighter pilots, including Colonels John...
Wait a minute!
They made John Boyd a colonel by this point? Oh my god. Colonels John Boyd and Robert Titus and Major John Axley to help him sell the FX program. In 1967, for example, cost estimates were predicted on a 10-year, 1,000 aircraft buy, whereas the 1968 estimates, good lord, considered a 635 aircraft production run. On 15 August, General McConnell approved the Air Force source selection plans and the Joint Air Force-Navy Engine Development Program. Secretary Brown's endorsement came the next month. DCP described the FX as a single-place, twin-engine aircraft featuring excellent pilot visibility, with internal fuel size for 200 nautical mile design mission, and a balanced combination of standoff missiles and close-in gun target kill potential. The one-man crew validation, validated during the point design studies, was predicated on the ability of a single pilot to perform nearly all missions assigned. The penalties for adding a second crewman, which included 5,000 to 6,000 pounds of extra weight at a cost of $500,000 per aircraft, were considered unacceptable. The twin-engine design was selected because it featured faster throttling response, commonality with the F-14, and earlier availability. Called for a 260-mile nautical mile mission radius, including 200 nautical mile cruise out and back, and a 60 nautical mile low-altitude terminal dash, with between 2.5 and 3 minutes of maximum power combat time. This capability replaced TAC's original requirement for 100 nautical mile dash for 5 minutes combat time. Still, the internal fuel load plus the external tanks going out provided the FX with an 800-850 nautical mile radius of action compared to the 450 nautical miles for the F4. In terms of speed, there was some compromise away from TAC's original requirements. The sea level maximum speed was set at Mach 1.2 to provide a continued U.S. advantage over Soviet fighters in that region, although relaxing the requirement to Mach 0.9 could have saved 2,000 pounds in weight. Similarly, TAC settled for a maximum speed of Mach 2.5 with bursts of Mach 2.5, as against its original Mach 2.7 requirement that would have added 3,000 pounds to the FX weight and reduced its dash radius to 300 to 30 nautical miles. The development concept paper failed to point out that to try to retrieve Mach 2.7 would have greatly increased the cost of the FX because of the added titanium metal content. Oh, okay. I love how they're providing reasons for the reductions in numbers as we go through the report, and they just got it out of the way that Boyd just assumed that these would be the best numbers without providing any rationale. Feather Duster and Have Donut, two tactical fighter flight tests conducted in 1968, showed that early detection of enemy aircraft was essential to permit a pilot to get into position for a first and usually lethal shot. Yes, that's the fatal flaw of the Fighter Mafia program. You have a radar. They didn't like radar because they thought radar was excess weight, completely failing to recognize the fact that radar gave you the decision-making capability to make your fighter not fucking useless. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. Thus, the choice was between a smaller, lighter aircraft that would be difficult for the enemy to detect and a larger aircraft like the FX that can more easily detect an enemy aircraft. Although selecting the latter, the Air Force left open a final trade-off until sometime during the contract definition phase. Cost estimates changed again because of a revised aircraft buy. This plan required only 520 aircraft. The Air Force argued it could afford neither the delay nor the estimated $600,000 cost of prototyping. Moreover, the Air Force indicated the aerodynamic and avionics risks were not great enough to require building a prototype. Actually, the Air Force position on this issue had grown out of a sense of urgency because of the challenge from the Navy's VFX and the inauguration of a new president who would make the usual changes in OSD's civilian leadership. The Air Force therefore found it expedient to keynote urgency over ideal procurement. So the F-15 was rushed into production. or rushed into contracting and production so they wouldn't have to worry about the Navy stealing their thunder. If I had $100 for all of the near mistakes that have been made in this single development process, I could have had my new model done when I started streaming. Let's see, the FX airframe would be purchased via the total package procurement concept, but higher risk subsystems would undergo competitive prototyping. On 24 September 1968, Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul H. Nietzsche the approved contract definition of the FX. A lot of this appears to be logistics. I'm gonna go ahead and skip to the FXX program. Oh, hey, look at this. Oh, wow. F-15 milestones. Here's like the entire planned timeline for the F-15. They wanted to get the first aircraft attack in November of 74, which if I'm not mistaken, that is exactly what they did. First flight, July of 1972. F-15, first flew in July in 1972. This aircraft was actually done on time. That's impressive. What happened to this? Where did this go? Let me see if I can find the FXX program. It's on like 77 or so. Oh, wait, whoa, diagrams. I saw pictures. Oh, these are all the contractors for McDonnell Douglas. Interesting. They expected all of their missiles to be mounted on the engine mount rails, not under the wings. Fairchild, what is this GE? Is this General Electric versus Pratt & Whitney? What the hell is this ugly looking thing? I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what this is, and I don't like it. And then North American. North American's looks kind of cool, but it also looks kind of weird. Fairchild's looks like a bastardized SR-71 and F-5. It does. North American looks like they took the A-5 Vigilante. Oh, they wanted to store those missiles internally. Huh. I don't know shit about engineering, but some of those diagrams hurt me. Facepalm intensifies. It looks Russian. It does look like it borrows the blended wing body concept. I want to kind of skip. Oh, hold it, please. Give me. I skip past it. Nice. That's sexy. Yeah, this is a sexy beast. That's why I love this thing. Behold the thrust shaft in all its glory. Yeah. Oh, here's something. F-15 versus Foxback and the 14. In urging development of the F-15, the Air Force was pressed to explain the aircraft's alleged inferiority to the Soviet Foxbat. Basically, industry sources claimed the F-15 could not defeat the high-speed, high-altitude Foxbat and urged scrapping the F-15 program. God damn, more bureaucratic bullshit. General Rhode Armour's team, however, was convinced Congress that in terms of maneuverability, the F-15 was superior to any existing or projected Soviet aircraft. They noted its superior maneuverability in air combat, emphasizing the F-15's decided edge in such key dogfight factors such as wing loading and thrust-to-weight ratio. Describing the Foxbat as a technological threat only, the Air Force remained convinced of the F-15's ability to outfly, outfight, and outfox the rest. Now, where the hell is the FXX program? I need more roasting of the fucking fighter mafia. Going back to the table of contents. Where was this? XX was on page 64. Oh, I was literally right at the end of it. Here it is. All right, everybody, grab your alcohol. We're going to talk about Pierre Spray. Buckle up. Grabbing gin. Yeah. Getting the Everclear. Yeah. Going to burn out your ears after this one. One proposed alternative to the F-15, dubbed the FXX, was the brainchild of Pierre M. Spray of systems analysis. He believed that the ASD engineers, responding to tax-absorbent requirements, paying little heed to cost, had produced a design that was too expensive, incorporated high-risk technology, and was unnecessarily complex, and would not achieve its advertised air superiority performance. Spray's alternative was a 25,000-pound single-seat, one-engine fighter with a high thrust-to-weight ratio and an estimated 25% more range than the FX. Fucking how? FXX was specifically designed for combat in the subsonic transonic region, employing a fixed-wing platform with 60 pounds per square foot wing loading. To carry a light internal gun and 2 Sidewinder missiles. Let's see. Spray's FXX proposal shunned complex avionics, featuring instead a simple visual radar, easy and inexpensive maintenance, and a unit cost of only $2 million, which is the same cost that the F-15 was supposed to have. This can't go poorly. Spay favored prototype development similar to Clarence L. Kelly Johnson's Skunkworks approach in building the SR-71. The alternative was also included a VFXX substitute for the Navy's F-14. Oh my god. Only $2 million in then money, yeah. However, you know what's funny though? According to some of the other sources I was looking at, Boyd was claiming credit for coming up with the FXX concept. Or at least Boyd was given credit. Here it says it was Pierre Spray. So it looks like the log is just one of those cases of Spray robbing credit from even his own fucking teammates to make himself look pretty. The Air Force and Navy... Okay, I love this. Already, I love this first sentence. The Air Force and Navy were not impressed. They rejected the proposed lightweight fighter because it lacked range for missions deep in enemy territory and could not carry the requisite avionics for countering enemy defenses. The services cited the short, unhappy experience of the F-104 as an example of the inadequacy of lightweight fighters. After enemy SAMs downed 2 F-104s on an escort mission over North Vietnam in 1966, the Air Force hastily withdrew the aircraft from further combat, which is interesting because some of those served as an exit escort for Operation Bolo in '67. But Sprague was not alone in advocating for a lightweight fighter. Indeed, many veteran Air Force pilots facetiously recommended the best solution to the air superiority problem was to buy MiG-21s. Simulations and flight tests during wait, full stop, hold up, roll that back. Many veteran Air Force fighter pilots sarcastically recommended that the best solution to the air superiority problem was to buy Soviet fighters. Buy MiGs, they wasn't their cup? Exactly, that's what I'm saying. This bullshit is on an entire different level of fucking what do you mean? That's a whole different level of world of say psych right now, yeah. That's exactly what that is. Marine Corps would be looking over at the flyboys pulling out the ceremonial saber, about to make it a very active use tool. About to give a whole new definition to saber rattling. Simulations and flight tests during the 1968 Feather Duster and Have Donut demonstrated the superior maneuverability of lightweight fighters. Several members of the air staff, aided by dissident Navy flyers, designed a lightweight fighter alternative to the F-15, and in August 1969 submitted their proposal to General Ryan. Suppressing the proposal, F-15 advocates used the episode to unify the Air Force position on the air superiority fighter. As later events showed, Sprague's FXX idea, though having considerable merit, was ill-timed. His criticism only united the Air Force and Navy against him because they were too far along in their advocacy to turn back to the drawing board. Neither wanted to relinquish the field to the other. Although by no means the last challenge to the F-15 and F-14 programs, it set the stage for their defense. A critical factor here was the OSD's inflexibility on the tactical Air Force structure. Because they could not shake OSD force size limits, both services preferred to develop aircraft that were as versatile as possible. And with that, we have cleaned out the rather dirty history of the F-15. I've linked the source document down below if you'd like more of the grainier details, and thank you for watching. We got merch and other links in the description, and if you like what you saw, please consider checking out some of my other videos. You might like what you find. Until next time, dismissed.